Yeah, it seems to work.
And we have liftoff. Hello everyone. My name is Njaku Gochuku Gatsin, and we have this AMA session live today, and we have Quincy with you. Quincy, can you please say hello?
Hello, everyone.
All right. So this AMA session is part of the Ubuntu program, which was it's a 6 week virtual program, virtual peer learning on JavaScript and Python. And this AMA session was to invite Quincy of Free Code Camp, one of the largest online resources for people to learn how to code, to come and give us a little bit of his experience as a lifelong teacher. And all right, over to you, Quincy. Can you please
Yeah,
tell us?
thank you so much for having me.
All right, all right, you can talk now.
Yeah, well, so the questions are going to come in through this Slido program.
Yep. So
Okay,
basically, I have. All right, you may begin. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started your journey.
sure. So I am 37 years old. I live in the middle of the United States right now. We've got two kids and um, just work as a software engineer at Free Code Camp. So the history of Free Code Camp is that I was working as a teacher and a school director, and I decided that I wanted to stop um, just working as a teacher and as a school director. I was learning. Jocelyn, shh. I was working as a school director. I'm sorry. Let me back up a little bit. So I was working as a school director, and I noticed that my teachers were having to spend a lot of time entering data into computers and keeping track of records and things like that. And I thought that this time could be better spent with students teaching. So I figured out some ways to partially automate the process so that so that the students could be able to spend a lot more time with the teachers. And in the process, I realized, wow, just with my very small amount of programming skills that I'm learning from Googling, I may be able to create a tool that could help a lot of schools where automate like their immigration paperwork, their attendance papers, all of those things. So I set out to do that, and I quickly realized that just building software to help schools would be great, but it was so difficult to learn to code properly that I could probably help a whole lot of people learn to code, and then they could go out and build things like a school administration system. So that was really the insight that spurred me down the path of technology education and helping people learn to code. So I started doing that back in, I think, 2012 was when I started focusing on technology education full time. And then 2014, late 2014, I created Free Code Camp, the first version of Free Code Camp, and put it live on the internet, and people started coming and using it. And we, the rest is kind of history. It's just grown dramatically. We have a whole lot of people in the community who are contributing to the open source project. We're a donor supported nonprofit, and we have a lot of people donating money so that we can pay for servers and pay to have. We have 5 people working full time on Free Code Camp now. So it's been a big adventure. And now, Jocelyn, can you turn the light back on? She's very it's Saturday morning. I'm going to take her to the science museum after this, so she's
All right.
very excited to go. But yeah, does that give you a good enough background in me and
Yeah.
Free Code Camp?
It was, it's basically what I've read on the internet, but it's quite good. It's been nice
Yeah.
talking to you. All right. So basically, you've been a lifelong teacher. So what has been your greatest achievement so far?
Yeah, so there are answers or there are questions that are coming in. I see one question from Anonymous that says, "Hey, Quincy, I've got a question. Should I wait for you to finish speaking first?" And well, I'm ready to take the question anytime.
Okay, so how it's gonna happen is um, after this question, we'll start with the created questions I came with, and we'll slowly progress towards your questions, Anonymous, and we'll surely get to answer everyone's questions. But the questions which are kind of similar, I'm gonna concatenate them and make them seem uniform, so we don't go over repeating and rebuilding the wheel. Is that cool with you, Quincy? Hello?
Yes. Sorry, my daughter's banging on the table on the chair, the bed. Yeah, so
So,
I'm ready for your questions, Njoku.
all right. So you have been a lifelong teacher. What has been your greatest challenge so far?
I've been a lifelong teacher. What has been my? I'm sorry.
Greatest challenge so far.
I would say the briefest challenge, the biggest challenge I've had as a teacher has just been figuring out how to understand what, like in a classroom, what learners want to learn, whether they understand, whether they don't, and people will naturally kind of feign understanding. They'll pretend that they understand because it's like an evolutionary thing. You don't want to be embarrassed because being embarrassed may mean you're rejected from your tribe and it reduces your likelihood of survival. So people will, Jocelyn, please quit banging. Please don't make too much noise. Daddy's on a call. She's 3 years old, so she's still learning how to do these things. But figuring out how you can relay content or relay knowledge to people without them rejecting it or without them their eyes just glassing over and losing interest or without them actively rebelling against the process of learning, which is, happens a lot, especially with younger kids. So I would say that, basic classroom management and reading the students and figuring out whether they're interested, whether what you could do to better engage them, how you can better communicate. Teaching is ultimately about communication and figuring out the optimal way to communicate. And uh, some people respond better to certain methods, but that has definitely fed into Free Code Camp because we decided we wanted to have first of all, it's the core curriculum is online and it's interactive, so people go on there and they have very quick feedback based on their performance. If they got something to, if a test passes, it tells them. If it doesn't pass, it tells them, and they can just hit a hotkey and run the test, and the test will run within a few milliseconds. So it's lightning fast feedback that is much faster than what you could get with a human. Let's say you had a one-on-one tutor who was sitting there and saying, okay, that's right, that's wrong. But at the same time, you don't necessarily have the same level of understanding. I mean, these tests are basic, like a line of JavaScript that checks to see whether a DOM element is in a certain position or that puts a certain input into your function to see if your function is returning the correct output. It's not the same as having an expert teacher who's sitting over your shoulder, looking at what you're doing and trying to understand why you might be going that approach. So there are there's a lot of room for improvement in the way that Free Code Camp teaches and the way that software teaches people in general. And I think we'll progress toward having a much smarter, almost kind of like, I don't know if you read science fiction, but there's this book by Neil Stephenson called Snow Crash, and Snow Crash, and in it, one of the characters is an artificial intelligence called the librarian, and basically the librarian is just there. You visit him in virtual reality, and he just tries to figure out effective ways of teaching you different things. You ask questions to the librarian, based on your question, he might think like, that's an interesting question because I think you're misunderstanding a certain thing, So eventually we'll get to the point where we have, artificial intelligence that's been programmed by probably thousands and thousands of teachers and millions of programmers to be able to steer people in those directions. But for now, it's still very much something that you absolutely need a human, and a computer is nowhere near as good as a human is at trying to figure out whether somebody understands something and how to go about helping them better understand it. Did you want to ask some more questions, Njoku, or did you want me to jump? I see some more questions in the Slido. I think Njoku may have disconnected. I'm not sure if I'm still alive. Let me check. I'm not sure if I'm still alive. Okay, it looks like I am still alive.
Okay, can you hear me? I'm back online.
Okay, great.
Network is continue.
No, I think that's a pretty comprehensive answer to that question.
Okay.
Just talking about basically the hardest part, the biggest thing I've learned as a teacher is just reading people and trying to understand what their level of comprehension and how I can better improve their understanding of a topic.
Wow, that's awesome. Okay, to our viewers who are watching us live and those who watch us later on, we're supposed to have been joined by an community builder from University of Nigeria. His name is Waba Okechukwu. So you can find him on Twitter at can you see that Enigma I am. So, but due to some issues, he couldn't come online to join this call. So back to where we are. So the next question for you, Quincy, is what advice would you give your younger self if you when you just started coding? If you had
Yeah,
given an advice to yourself, what would you give it?
that's a great question. I think I would tell my younger self, which I've only been coding for like 5 years, so I'd travel back 6 years. So I'd travel back to when I was 31 and working as a school director in an office, and I would tell myself, the tools don't matter that much. At the time, I was spending so much time and so much energy focused on learning specific tools. I wanted to learn Vim. I wanted to learn Emacs. I wanted to get really, really good at the Linux command line. And I spent so much time doing these kinds of things instead of just sitting down and building something. And I feel like if I'd just spent that time building and coding, I probably could have saved at least 6 months of time that I spent going down rabbit holes. So I was just so obsessed with trying to get the best tools on hand and get like a really, really good computer that's perfect for programming and all that. And the reality is you can program on a library computer that, you just jump into a browser and use Code Sandbox or you use CodePen or FreeCodeCamp, any kind of environment, and you're doing real coding. You're working with programming languages, and you can do version control and anything on any system. You could do it on a Windows machine, for example. You could just download the GitHub client, and push your code that way. As far as deployment, you don't have to use AWS. You can just use a tool like Glitch, which Glitch didn't exist when I was doing it, but that's still a fully functional web app. You just need to plug a database into it. As far as database, it doesn't really matter that much. You can use Postgres, you can use MongoDB. They're just places to store data. You can use Redis, depending on the type of data you have. So I would have gone back and told myself, the tools don't matter that much. Don't sweat over the tools. Just focus on coding as much as possible.
This is a quick survey question. So bare bones coding versus use of frameworks. What's your take? That's okay. Let me bring it down. So that's raw CSS versus use of frameworks such as Bootstrap, Materialize. What's your take on it? What do you prefer someone should learn?
I would recommend learning the fundamentals first, and then you're in a much better position to be able to make informed decisions about which frameworks you want to use. Those tools can save you a lot of time and energy, but it's good to understand how they work on a more fundamental level. So Free Code Camp strongly emphasized learning basic HTML, basic JavaScript, basic CSS before we start to go up into learning, React and learning Bootstrap and Sass and other more powerful tools that can allow you to save a tremendous amount of time. But at the same time, if you already have that strong foundation, you'll be in a much better position to learn new tools, and you'll be much more flexible. So when a tool kind of comes and goes, which does happen. I mean, even Angular, which was really popular when I was first learning the program, is still heavily used today. There are a lot of companies that are still using Angular 1.x. So there are still jobs associated with it. So I think the concern about the ecosystem's changing so fast, I think that's kind of overblown. I think just calm down, make sure you master the fundamentals, and then you'll be in a very good position to pick up new skills just in time.
Okay. My next question is for it's about for newbies. They always ask this build consistency when I just started out because it's kind of overwhelming for them for the fact that they have to learn HTML, learn CSS, and jump straight into JavaScript. Then the JavaScript kind of it shuffles the deck for them. So they are trying to understand how to get that consistency so they can level up. So you can
Yeah,
answer right now.
yeah. Well, don't be daunted. Don't be intimidated. The key is to just keep going forward, and it's not about daily progress. It's about progress daily. You want to be sitting down and coding every single day. And if you get intimidated and you think, oh, I should, the first instinct you'll have is, oh, I should just change tools, or I should change from JavaScript to Python. Python's easier to learn. Or, oh, then when you start to get to a hard place with Python, you're going to be like, oh, well, I should switch back to JavaScript, or I should try Ruby. I've heard good things about Ruby. So you have to resist those temptations to jump around, and you just have to stay focused. Whichever tools you're using now, just dig in and learn them now. And the absolute key is don't be intimidated. Remember that even people who have 20 years experience doing web development still Google things. They still ask other people on Stack Overflow for help and things like that. So yeah, don't be intimidated.
Okay. All right. So we have a question on the Slido app from Dominic Ada. He's asking about someone who the advice you give to an upcoming developer aiming to be a full stack developer, and he's kind of having like, should I say, imposter syndrome because he feels he's still at the lowest end of the chain because he cannot do anything. But because of daily, he comes across things he doesn't know and continually feels bad about himself, asking himself, he's constantly asking himself, where will he get to the top full stack developer? Over to you,
Yeah.
Quincy.
Well, there are so many factors. Reality is complex. Depending on what you define as a full stack developer, like somebody who's, I define it as somebody who's paid by somebody else. They're a professional. You want to become a professional, there are several ways you can do that. One, you can get a job somewhere. That's the most common and probably best first way to become a full stack developer. Two, you could become a freelancer. You could find some local business, whether it's a hospital or a bank or a church or a government office that needs some web development work, and you could do it for them. Or three, you could just start your own project that, and drop Stripe or some sort of PayPal, some sort of payment system in there where people can pay for your product, and then just focus on building that product out. And I've done all three in the sense that Free Code Camp, we're an NGO, but we take donations. So that's how the organization supports itself. Before I did freelancing, I would just help my friends build their websites and just meet people and help them build things. And then before that, I worked as a software engineer full time. So you can get to that level as fast as you want. There are no speed limits. There's no set period of time that you should expect it to take. It's just a question of consistency and luck. a big part of that is building your network as well, just meeting people in your city, going to events, and getting to know other developers who can potentially refer work to you if they're too busy. They can be like, well, I know Dominic, and Dominic's good. So
Next question is asking about you talking about projects. Give examples of projects that you could do. Instant is he knows JavaScript and Java is among the Ubuntu program participants. So on the JavaScript track. So over to you, Quincy. Can you give him an example of a project that I could work on?
a project he could work on, meaning like something, an open source project he could contribute to.
Yeah, a project or something you could work on this side because he's currently working full time
Yeah.
as a software developer intern.
Well, the best projects to contribute to would be projects where you already have users. So Free Code Camp has a lot of different projects within Free Code Camp that you could potentially contribute to. And those are already being used by millions of people a month. You could also go to some place like you
Oh,
can contribute to Firefox directly. You could contribute to Linux. There are a lot of places where you could contribute and get practice while you're also helping existing people. You could also build your own project. Let's say you have this theory that people in your town really want to find musical performances, and the current tools aren't sufficient. Then you could build like a local music finder tool that people could just go to this website and find all the local music and when people are playing. There are a lot of things you could do. So I would just encourage you to always think about the end users and who's going to be using this project, and make sure that you're building things that are useful for them rather than just building things for the sake of they're cool. I mean, yeah, you could probably launch your own cryptocurrency. You could probably you build like an AR app or something like that. You build some chatbots, but if people aren't going to be using it, it's purely just a fun learning experience. But you can learn while you're also helping people. So if you're already working full time, I would just the simplest thing is just to contribute to an existing open source project. Then the responsibility is ultimately that of the maintainers, and as time permits, you can just contribute.
all right. Okay, the next is gonna be for those who are working full time already. I have a friend who asked one time, like, I'm working full time, but I don't know how to, like, he works an 8 to 5 gig as a
Mm-hmm.
software developer intern, and he's trying to see whether I can still carve out time to learn new things to stay relevant in his field. He does back-end web development. So
Yeah.
over to you, Quincy.
Oh, I'm sorry. What was the question?
Okay, someone who is working full time and still wants to learn, so he stays relevant in his field. But his job is a full-time job that stays allows him stay in the office for 8 to 5. That's 8 a.m. to 5. He spends commuting from his home to his workplace. So he's trying to find out how he could stay up to date with current happenings in his field.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of tools online. There's Reddit. There's Hacker News. Um, there are a lot of places where you can read things. One thing I recommend is listening to podcasts when you're driving to and from work is a great time to listen to a podcast. You're getting on the bus, you're getting on the train, depending on how you get to work. I wouldn't necessarily recommend listening to the podcast if you're riding a bicycle. You probably want to pay a little closer attention to the people around you, but if you're walking, sure. And you can just listen to Software Engineering Daily. It's a great podcast. It's an hour every day, so that's a lot of additional learning. And Software Engineering Daily, every day you'll get like a deep dive into a new field of technology, whether that's driverless cars, whether that's Kubernetes or some new Java library or a new JavaScript framework. I mean, all kinds of people are on that show, and it's a great way to get a lot of exposure and broaden your understanding of technology in general.
All right. So the next question is for individuals who find it difficult to work on projects, that's build projects, personal projects, but they tend to understand the fundamentals of software development, but they find it difficult to actually work on their own personal projects, but they work well under constraints and pressure. That's when they are. But the thing is, it's harder for them to get jobs. So, what do you have to say to those of them?
Um, so people who are already working on projects, but it's hard for them to get jobs.
Yep.
Just make a lot of personal connections. Like go to events in your city and meet potential employers, meet potential peers who are already working at those companies, and build a reputation for yourself. Be active on Quora or on Medium or on LinkedIn, all these different websites. Just get a personal website, those kinds of things. By doing that, you should make
All
it
right.
easier for them to associate you with something and you have an existing reputation.
Okay. All right. So, another question is about code reviews. Maybe a newbie developer is looking for is trying to find out ways to get someone in the community to help out with code reviews, and I believe he can't seem to get anyone on board. What do you have to say to those kind of people?
Yeah, well, you could use an existing community. You could post your code. You could post your projects on Free Code Camp's forum, for example, and you'll usually be able to get pretty quick feedback there. Uh, if you have other friends who need code reviews, then you can reciprocate and you can review their code and they can review yours. So you're probably going to have to invest time yourself in doing code reviews for other people if you want people to invest time in doing code reviews for you.
Okay. How to know when to apply for your first developer job? Please go on.
This is a very common question, and there's no right answer here. Whenever you feel ready, you probably waited too long. So I would recommend there's no harm in just starting applying shortly after you learn some basics. I would recommend working through all of Free Code Camp's 6 certifications real quick, it's more than 1,000 hours worth of work, but becoming a developer is a major undertaking and you shouldn't take it lightly. You should expect for it to take a year for you to learn how to code and go out and get a good job. Now you can apply immediately and you may be able to get a job, but it might be, managing like some Drupal website from 10 years ago or something like that, or being like a database administrator at a school or something like that. It's not the amount of time and energy you put into learning will reap rewards in terms of more compensation, more responsibility in your jobs. So you definitely want to put in the time to learn and not just go out and blindly apply everywhere and try to basically get a job at any place that'll hire you. I do think that it's worth putting the extra time and energy into learning.
Awesome. Okay, this is from the health-wise section. How does one cope with anxiety and imposter syndrome as a software developer?
I just remind myself, as somebody who has certainly experienced anxiety and imposter syndrome before. I mean, when you're in your 30s and you're getting into tech, and a lot of your peers just went straight from high school to undergraduate CS program to working in tech, you can feel like you can feel like an outsider, and that was the case with me. But I just reminded myself, I'm just because I'm in my 30s doesn't mean that I'm going through anything different than anybody else went through during the frustration of initially learning the code, having errors, having to read stack traces, having to figure out how to word your questions so that you can properly look it up on Google or Stack Overflow. So I just constantly reminded myself, everybody goes through some form of like this, or not everybody necessarily, but most people go through something like this. This is a typical experience. I'm not dumb. I'm not incapable of learning these things, or I don't believe that programming is something that people are born to do. I think it's very much just how passionate they are and how much time and energy they put into getting good at it. So if you just keep reminding yourself of that, you'll get there. It's just going to take a lot of hard work, but anything worth doing takes a lot of hard work. There are no shortcuts to anywhere worth going, as Beverly Sills says. So I would just encourage you to think like that and don't let the imposter syndrome get you down. Just accept those feelings. They're always going to be there. It's not like you can just snap your fingers. Oh, but being aware of that makes a big difference. Just knowing that, yeah, this is a feeling that a lot of people experience, but it's okay because all these other people have gone through it and I'll be able to go through it too. It's fine.
All right. So this question is from those who are developers but code in isolation. They are not actively in the community. So they are trying to find ways on getting into the community and collaborating with individuals so as to grow out their networks. Because you can't be a software developer in isolation. Although, as of then, say 10 years back ago, you could be a developer in isolation and still make it. But currently now, it requires you going out to see other people so you could grow out your network, get those jobs you need. So, what is your advice for them?
My advice for people who would prefer to work in isolation.
Yes.
Yeah,
But
and I'm
want to
not
get
sure
active in the
somebody.
community.
Yeah, I would encourage people to go ahead and just go on meetup.com or go on Facebook or whichever website people are using to post events in your city, and just start browsing through there and find some events and go to them. Initially it may be a little awkward. You won't necessarily know anybody there, but just be friendly and get to know people and build your network that way. It makes a big difference if you're in the same room shaking somebody's hand as opposed to just on some forum somewhere, which isn't, I mean, it's better than nothing for sure, but I would encourage people to go to in-person events as well. That'll be a really good way to kind of get into the community and meet people and be a known entity among the developers in your town.
Okay. All right. This question here is for those who don't have an idea of picking out a practical path. They seem to have their fingers in almost every pie. You get that kind of thing. They are reluctant to pick a particular path to work towards. To every and they just try to anything that fascinates them. They tend to jump on it and work with it. They are kind of like the everyday masters of none. What's your advice to them?
Yeah, well, just know that everybody is tempted to jump around and put their fingers in every pie, so to speak. Resist that temptation. The first key to having the willpower to overcome some tendency is acknowledging that tendency exists and that it's not just you. Everybody feels something similar to that. It's okay. But you really should focus. And I strongly recommend people who are new to development, especially, just stay as focused as possible. That's why Free Code Camp doesn't have a bunch of electives and stuff, right? It's just a linear curriculum. You start here, you work through this, you work through this, you work through this, boom, you're done with Free Code Camp. Like the certifications, and you can go out and learn whatever you want. And we have tons of additional resources that you can use as well. But I would strongly recommend trying to focus on just doing Free Code Camp first before you dive into a bunch of, graduate level university courses that have been put online, for example.
Okay. So we're in the month of October. Is Hacktoberfest.
Mm-hmm.
Every developer what is 2 bits is actively contributing to open source. So I want you to share some tips on getting started with open source.
Sure.
What's the fun of it?
Well, you should definitely create a GitHub account. You should create an account over on the Hacktoberfest website. And if you get 5 pull requests, if you open up 5 pull requests, even if they're not accepted, if you open up 5 pull requests that are not marked invalid, because as a maintainer, a lot of times I'll mark a pull request as invalid, so it doesn't count toward Hacktoberfest in case, if it's clear that they were just, not putting any effort at all into it. But we are getting a lot of pull requests at Free Code Camp. I think we have two of the more popular repositories for pull requests this year. And last year, I think we were the biggest repository in terms of the total number of pull requests received. So the first step, of course, register on GitHub, register on Hacktoberfest, and then find some way that you can contribute to an existing repository. Free Code Camp has if you Google Hacktoberfest, one of the top articles will be by me, and you'll be able to click through and that shows you exactly how to contribute to, for example, the Free Code Camp repository. And then after you make some contributions to Free Code Camp, if you want, you can go try to contribute to some other repositories. And there are a ton of repositories that are participating. You can sort on GitHub by the Hacktoberfest tag, and you'll get a lot of issues that way. So there are a lot of ways you can get involved, and I strongly encourage you to do it. At the very least, you'll get a really cool t-shirt that will serve as kind of a trophy of your open source contributions during this month.
All right. I got mine last year, still in my wardrobe. I wear it almost every day, if I can. All right, so into an end, we couldn't get so many questions. People are not so active today. That's a meetup happening for designers, so not so many people are online. So, whether there are any more few things you'd like to add to this AMA session?
I would just encourage everybody to participate in Hacktoberfest and sign up at Free Code Camp. It's improving every day. It's completely free. You don't even need to create an account if you just want to work through some coding challenges or read some articles. And we're here on YouTube too. Check out the Free Code Camp YouTube channel. We're publishing lots of new tutorials and in-depth courses, all of which are free and commercial free. So check them out. And if anybody wants to ask me a question, just tweet at me. I'm twitter.com/OSSIA, and I will be happy to answer your questions there as well. So thanks everybody for taking the time to ask these questions, and thank you to you, Njoku, for hosting this.
Okay, I just realized that at the beginning of this AMA session, I didn't introduce myself. It's quite bad for me.
Yeah, go for it.
My name is Njoku Gochukwu Godson. I go by the alias Godspeed. So it's any one of them you feel you could call me. You could call me. You could find me on Twitter at sage_Godspeed. And our Enigma joined us later on. But since he found out I'm holding down the fort properly, he's quite been on mute. His name is Nwaba Okechukwu. He's the Developer Student Club lead for University of Nigeria.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Nwaba. Say hello.
Yeah, hello, Quincy. Hello. My name is Okechukwu. I'm the Developer Students Club lead for my university. And thank you very much for helping. And Njoku, thank you very much for putting this all together. Quincy, thank you very much for answering all our questions and everything you've done so far. Sorry I came in late. I've been having internet issues.
Yeah, no worries.
I'm fine. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Okay. I guess that's a wrap. So as Quincy already signed off his emails, cheers.
All right. You all have a beautiful weekend, and happy coding, everyone.
Cheers. Au revoir. Thank you for watching.